My name is Ellison. I'm 41 years old and I'm a software engineer specializing in business process automation. For the past 9 years, I built something extraordinary with my best friend from college, Voss. We called it Ellison and Voss Systems. We started with nothing but 2 laptops and a poorly paid freelance contract. I was the technical brain. Sterling was the charming spokesperson. I never minded being behind the scenes. The focus was always growth. We complemented each other perfectly. I designed the systems, wrote the code, created the architecture that made everything scalable. Sterling handled investors, closed deals, represented us at conferences. It worked. For 9 years, it worked beautifully. We grew from that first contract into a legitimate tech company with real clients, real revenue, real potential. Then we hit $10 million in valuation. In early 2023, the day after our preliminary evaluation meeting with a major investment fund, I received an official memorandum from the company's legal department. I was alone in my home office when I opened it. The language was cold, corporate, final. By unanimous decision of the board, all executive decisions will now be centralized exclusively under CEO Sterling Voss. We appreciate your technical contributions up to this point. No phone call, no conversation, no warning, just a document. I read it twice, saved it carefully, and sat in silence for a long time. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. I called Sterling immediately. He didn't answer. I texted him. Nothing. 3 hours later, he sent a brief message. "Let's talk tomorrow. This is just restructuring." But I knew better. I'd seen the signs for months. Sterling had started excluding me from board calls. He scheduled investor meetings without copying me on the invitations. Documents were being altered, contracts modified without my review. The most telling detail came 3 weeks earlier when I reviewed a pitch deck he'd sent to a venture capital firm. My name had been removed from the co-founder section entirely. I didn't react emotionally. That's not who I am. I'm an engineer. I work with logic, patterns, data. And the pattern was clear. Sterling Voss was systematically erasing me from the company we'd built together. The next day, we met at a coffee shop near our office in downtown Seattle. Sterling arrived 15 minutes late, which was unusual. He ordered a double espresso and sat across from me with a rehearsed smile. "Graham, listen," he said. "This isn't personal. The company's entering a new phase. We need streamlined leadership. The investors want clarity in the command structure." "Streamlined leadership," I repeated. "By removing one of the 2 founders." "You're not being removed," he said quickly. "You're still Chief Technology Officer. You'll still have equity. This is just about decision-making efficiency." I looked at him carefully. We'd known each other for 15 years. I could read every micro-expression, every tell. He was lying. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. He shifted in his seat. "Nothing. This is standard corporate evolution, Graham. You're taking it too personally." "Show me the new cap table," I said. His eyes flickered, just for a second. "Why would you need to see that right now?" "Because if this is just restructuring, the equity distribution shouldn't have changed." He didn't answer immediately. That told me everything. I left the coffee shop without another word. Sterling called after me, but I didn't turn around. I had work to do. Back in my home office, I opened my secure backup drive. Everything was there. Every version of every foundational document, every email, every digitally signed contract, every iteration of our operating agreement. I'd been methodical from day one. The main codebase had invisible watermarks with my author ID embedded throughout. But I'd also done something else, something Sterling knew nothing about. 6 months earlier, I'd renegotiated the licensing terms for a critical API we used with a European vendor. The API was essential to our platform's core functionality. Without it, Ellison and Voss systems couldn't operate, and I'd structured the new agreement so that any sale or transfer of the company required my formal written authorization. The vendor had been happy to accommodate. They trusted me. I'd been their primary contact for years. Sterling had no idea. I spent the next 72 hours digging deeper. I accessed shared drives Sterling thought were private. I reviewed meeting minutes from board sessions I hadn't been invited to. I cross-referenced financial projections with actual cash flow statements. The picture became devastatingly clear. Sterling had been negotiating a sale of the company for nearly 4 months. The buyer was Bridgepoint Capital, a private equity fund based in Boston. The preliminary offer was $8.3 million. According to the term sheet I found buried in a folder labeled Legal Archive 2019, Sterling had positioned himself as the sole driving force behind the company's success. My role had been minimized to senior technical contributor rather than co-founder. The cap table had been manipulated. Our original agreement gave us equal equity, 50% each. The new version, dated just 6 weeks earlier, showed Sterling with 68% and me with 18%. The remaining 14% had been distributed to advisory board members who didn't exist. It was pure fiction designed to dilute my stake and maximize his payout. But here's what Sterling didn't understand about me. I don't react impulsively. I don't make noise. I document, I plan, and I execute with precision. I contacted 3 people. First, my attorney, David Rothstein, a corporate lawyer in San Francisco who specialized in founder disputes. Second, the European vendor who controlled our API licensing. Third, a forensic accountant named Patricia Hendricks, who'd helped me analyze financial discrepancies in a previous consulting project. David reviewed everything I sent him. His response came back in 48 hours. This is fraud. Clear-cut securities fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. You have an airtight case. Patricia's analysis was equally damning. She traced fund transfers, identified fabricated expenses, and discovered that Sterling had been funneling company money into a personal LLC for months. Nearly $200,000 had been siphoned off through fake vendor invoices. The European vendor confirmed what I already knew. Without my authorization, any transfer of company ownership would immediately terminate the API license. And without that API, Ellison and Voss systems was worthless. I had everything I needed, but I didn't move yet. I wanted Sterling to commit fully to his betrayal. I wanted him all the way out on the thinnest branch before I cut it down. 2 weeks later, Sterling called me. His voice was artificially upbeat. "Graham, good news," he said. "The Bridgepoint deal is moving forward. They want to close in 30 days. You'll get a decent payout from your equity, probably around $400,000 after taxes. $400,000 from a company worth over $8 million, from a company I'd spent 9 years building from nothing." "That's great, Sterling," I said calmly. "Send me the paperwork." He seemed surprised by how easily I accepted it. "Really? You're okay with this?" "Why wouldn't I be?" I said. "You've always been better at the business side. If you think this is the right move, I trust your judgment." There was a pause. I could hear the relief in his breathing. "I appreciate that, Graham," he said. "I really do. You're a good friend." I hung up and immediately sent an email to Bridgepoint Capital. The subject line was simple: critical disclosure regarding Ellison and Voss Systems acquisition. I attached a comprehensive dossier. It included time-stamped evidence of Sterling's fraud, the original cap table showing equal ownership, documentation of the API licensing restrictions, financial analysis from Patricia Hendricks, and a legal opinion from David Rothstein outlining Sterling's multiple breaches of contract and fiduciary duty. I sent copies to the Bridgepoint managing partner, their legal counsel, and their due diligence team. Then I sent the same package to our company's board of directors, which consisted of Sterling, myself, and 2 angel investors who'd contributed early funding. The response was immediate. Within 4 hours, I received a call from Jonathan Pierce, Bridgepoint's managing partner. His tone was professional but firm. "Mr. Ellison, we've reviewed your materials," he said. "We're suspending the acquisition pending an emergency board meeting. We need both founders present. Can you make yourself available tomorrow at 2 p.m.? "I can," I said. "Good. We'll be conducting this meeting in person at our Boston office. We're flying both of you out tonight." Sterling called me 6 times in the next hour. I didn't answer. Finally, he showed up at my house. I watched him through the window as he rang the doorbell repeatedly. He looked panicked. I let him stand there for 5 minutes before I opened the door. "What the hell did you do?" he said immediately. "I told the truth," I replied. His face was flushed. "You sent them lies. You're sabotaging the deal because you're bitter about the restructuring." "Show me one lie in what I sent them," I said. "Just one." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had nothing. "I tried to be fair to you," he said finally. "I offered you a reasonable exit, but you had to be difficult. You offered me $400,000 from a company worth $8 million, I said. A company we built equally. "That's not fair, Sterling, that's theft." "You don't understand business," he snapped. "You're a coder, you build things, I make deals. That's why I'm the CEO and you're not." I looked at him for a long moment. This person I'd trusted for 15 years. This person I'd worked beside for 9 years. He genuinely believed he deserved everything and I deserved nothing. "See you in Boston tomorrow," I said, and closed the door. The flight to Boston was silent. Sterling sat 3 rows behind me. I could feel his anger radiating forward. When we landed, separate cars took us to the Bridgepoint offices downtown. The meeting room was on the 42nd floor with a view of the harbor. Jonathan Pierce sat at the head of the table. His legal counsel, Margaret Walsh, sat to his right. Our 2 board members, Richard Alvarez and Susan Tompkins, sat on the left side. Sterling and I sat across from each other. Jonathan didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Gentlemen, we have a problem," he said. "Mr. Ellison has presented evidence that directly contradicts the representations made by Mr. Voss during our negotiation process. We need clarity before we proceed." Sterling leaned forward. "Jonathan, Graham is upset about internal restructuring. He's using this acquisition as leverage to renegotiate his position. This is a negotiation tactic, nothing more." "Is it?" Margaret asked. She slid a document across the table. "This is the original operating agreement for Ellison and Voss systems, signed by both of you 9 years ago. It clearly shows equal equity distribution. Can you explain why the current cap table shows a 68-18 split?" Sterling's confident expression faltered. "That was amended through proper corporate process. Graham was diluted based on performance metrics and contribution reassessment." "Where's the documentation of this amendment?" Margaret asked. Sterling glanced at his lawyer, who'd accompanied him but had remained silent until now. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "We're prepared to provide that documentation within 48 hours. "You don't have it," I said quietly. "Because it doesn't exist." Jonathan looked at me. "Mr. Ellison, walk us through what you've discovered." I opened my laptop and connected it to the room's presentation screen. I'd prepared everything methodically. First, I displayed the original operating agreement with both signatures clearly visible. Then I showed the timeline of cap table modifications, each one dated and logged with metadata, showing Sterling's user account as the sole editor. "These changes were made unilaterally," I said, "without board approval, without my consent, and without any legitimate corporate authorization. They were made to artificially inflate Sterling's equity position before the sale." Richard Alvarez, one of our angel investors, spoke up. "Sterling, is this true? Did you modify the cap table without board approval?" Sterling's face had gone pale. "Richard, you have to understand the context. Graham became difficult to work with. He was resistant to growth strategies. I had to make executive decisions." "Executive decisions don't include fraudulent equity modifications," Susan Tompkins said sharply. "That's not authority. That's embezzlement." I displayed the next set of evidence. "This is more serious," I said. "Over the past 8 months, Sterling created a shell company called Voss Consulting LLC. He then generated fake vendor invoices from this company to Ellison and Voss systems, totaling $197,000. The money was transferred to accounts he personally controls." Margaret was taking notes rapidly. Jonathan's expression had turned ice cold. "These are serious allegations," Jonathan said. "Mr. Voss, do you have a response?" Sterling stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Graham is fabricating evidence because he's angry. Voss Consulting is a legitimate entity. I provided legitimate consulting services to the company. What services? I asked. Strategic planning, investor relations, business development. Show me one deliverable, I interrupted. One report, one presentation, one document that proves you provided any service worth $197,000. He said nothing. I pulled up the final piece of evidence. There's one more thing Bridgepoint should know. The API that powers our core platform, the technology that makes our product functional, is licensed through an agreement I personally negotiated with the vendor. That agreement includes a clause requiring my written authorization for any change in company ownership. Without my signature, the license terminates immediately upon sale. The room went completely silent. Jonathan looked at Margaret. She nodded slowly. He turned to Sterling. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Jonathan said. You attempted to sell us a company where you'd fraudulently inflated your equity, embezzled nearly $200,000, and failed to disclose that the core technology license would terminate upon acquisition. Is that accurate? Sterling's lawyer finally spoke up. Mr. Pierce, we request a recess to consult with our client. Denied, Jonathan said flatly. Mr. Voss, I'm asking you directly. Did you know about the API licensing restriction? Sterling's jaw tightened. I knew Graham had some arrangement with the vendor. I didn't think it was relevant. You didn't think it was relevant that your co-founder controlled the licensing rights to your product's core functionality? Margaret asked incredulously. Graham always handled technical relationships, Sterling said weakly. I focused on business development. You focused on defrauding your business partner and attempting to defraud us, Jonathan said. He closed his folder with a sharp snap. This acquisition is terminated. We will not be purchasing Ellison and Voss systems under any circumstances. Furthermore, we are obligated to report the financial irregularities we've discovered to the appropriate regulatory authorities. Sterling's face went from pale to red. You can't do this. We have a term sheet. We have an agreement. We have a term sheet based on fraudulent representations, Margaret said. That makes it void. You're fortunate we're not pursuing damages for the time and resources we've wasted on this due diligence. Jonathan turned to Richard and Susan. As board members, I strongly recommend you call an emergency board meeting to address Mr. Voss's conduct. What we've seen today constitutes clear grounds for removal and potential criminal charges. Richard nodded grimly. We'll convene within 24 hours. Sterling turned to me. His eyes were filled with rage and something else. Desperation. You destroyed everything, he said. 9 years of work. You destroyed it because you couldn't handle not being in charge. No, I said calmly. You destroyed it when you decided to steal from the person who built it with you. I just made sure you didn't profit from the theft. He stood there for a moment longer, then grabbed his briefcase and walked out. His lawyer hurried after him. The door closed with a heavy thud. Jonathan exhaled slowly. Mr. Ellison, I apologize for what you've endured. For what it's worth, your documentation and presentation were exemplary. You clearly understand both the technical and business aspects of your company. Thank you, I said. I have a question, he continued. Would you be interested in selling the company under different terms? Terms that accurately reflect your contribution and ownership? I considered it. Possibly. But first, the board needs to resolve Sterling's status, and the company needs a full forensic audit to determine the complete extent of the financial irregularities. Susan leaned forward. Graham, speaking as a board member, I want to formally apologize. We should have been more attentive. We should have questioned the restructuring when Sterling first proposed it. You trusted him, I said. So did I, for 9 years. Richard stood up and extended his hand. We're calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. back in Seattle. Sterling will be formally removed as CEO. The board will appoint you as interim CEO to stabilize operations and determine next steps. Does that work for you? I shook his hand. It does. The flight back to Seattle was peaceful. I sat alone with my laptop, reviewing the company's financial statements and planning the next steps. Sterling had done significant damage, but the core business was sound. The technology was solid. The client base was loyal. With proper leadership and transparent accounting, Ellison and Voss systems could recover. The emergency board meeting the next morning was brief. Sterling didn't attend. His lawyer sent a resignation letter citing differences in strategic vision. The board voted unanimously to accept his resignation and appoint me as CEO. They also voted to restore the original cap table, giving me back my rightful 50% equity. Susan made a motion to pursue legal action against Sterling for the embezzled funds. Richard seconded it. The vote was unanimous. Over the next several months, I worked 18-hour days rebuilding what Sterling had damaged. I brought in an interim CFO to clean up the finances. I personally met with every major client to reassure them about the company's stability and direction. I hired 2 senior engineers to strengthen the technical team, and I started conversations with 3 different acquisition firms, this time with complete transparency about the company's actual structure, finances, and potential. Patricia Hendricks completed her forensic audit and discovered that Sterling had actually embezzled $243,000, not $197,000, as I'd initially calculated. The additional funds had been hidden through more sophisticated layering techniques. We recovered $182,000 of it through frozen accounts and asset seizures. The remainder was gone, spent on luxury purchases and gambling debts we discovered through subpoenaed credit card records. Sterling hired a criminal defense attorney. He tried to negotiate a settlement that would avoid prosecution. His lawyer reached out to David Rothstein with an offer. Sterling would repay the full embezzled amount plus interest if we agreed not to press charges and signed a mutual non-disparagement agreement. David called me to discuss the offer. "It's not a bad deal financially," he said. "You'd get your money back and you'd avoid the time and expense of litigation." "What does he keep if we settle?" I asked. "His freedom and his reputation mostly. No criminal record, no public disclosure of what he did." "Decline the offer," I said. "Forward everything to the district attorney." "Are you sure?" "This could take time." "I'm sure." The King County District Attorney's office moved quickly. They built their case in just under 4 months. Sterling was charged with wire fraud, securities fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. Faced with overwhelming evidence, his attorney advised him to accept a plea deal. Sterling pleaded guilty in late 2023. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in federal prison and ordered full restitution of $243,000 plus penalties. He also received a 5-year ban from serving as an officer or director of any public company. The legal consequences were just the beginning of Sterling's problems. The tech community in Seattle is large, but interconnected. Word spread quickly about what had happened. Sterling's name became associated with fraud and betrayal. Meanwhile, I completed the sale of Ellison and Voss systems in early 2024, roughly 10 months after taking over as CEO. The buyer was Cascade Technologies, a Seattle-based firm that specialized in business automation tools. The acquisition price was $9.4 million. After taxes, legal fees, and settling company debts, I walked away with $6.2 million. Richard and Susan, our angel investors, each received $1.1 million for their early support. The remaining equity was distributed to key employees who'd stayed loyal during the transition period. Everyone who contributed to building the company received compensation that reflected their actual contribution. With my proceeds from the sale, I founded a new company called the Ellison Method. It's not a software company. It's a consultancy that helps startup founders protect themselves from exactly what happened to me. I teach technical founders how to structure operating agreements, implement proper corporate governance, recognize early warning signs of founder disputes, and document everything from day one. I also work with venture capital firms to improve their due diligence processes. The Bridgepoint situation taught me that even sophisticated investors can miss fundamental fraud if the perpetrator is sufficiently charming and the victim is sufficiently silent. My first client was a 28-year-old engineer named Robert Palmer, who'd built a successful SaaS platform with his college roommate. Robert's partner had started making the same moves Sterling made, excluding him from meetings, modifying documents without consultation, positioning himself as the sole visionary. Robert came to me just 3 months into the pattern. We implemented a comprehensive protection strategy. We documented everything, restructured the operating agreement with proper safeguards, and established clear board oversight. When Robert's partner attempted to execute the same type of betrayal Sterling had tried, we stopped it before any real damage occurred. The partner was removed, Robert took full control, and the company continued operating successfully. That case became my template. Between early 2024 and now in September 2025, I've worked with 47 companies. 32 were in early stages of founder conflict. 15 were preventative consultations for new startups wanting to avoid problems before they started. I've helped prevent millions of dollars in fraud and saved countless partnerships from the kind of destruction Sterling caused. Sterling was released from federal prison in mid-2025 after serving 12 months with good behavior. He tried to rebuild his career. He reached out to former contacts, pitched consulting services, attempted to position himself as a business strategist who'd learned from past mistakes. No one would work with him. He moved to Austin in late summer and tried to launch a new startup. He found one angel investor willing to take a chance, a recent college graduate named Tyler Brennan, who'd made money in cryptocurrency and didn't know Sterling's history. They formed a company called Apex Solutions and raised an initial seed round of $300,000 from Tyler's personal funds. I heard about it through mutual acquaintances. I didn't interfere. I didn't need to. Within 4 months, Tyler discovered that Sterling had been inflating expense reports and diverting company funds to personal accounts. The exact same pattern. Tyler dissolved the company immediately and confronted Sterling directly. There was no lawsuit this time. Tyler just walked away and warned everyone in his network to avoid Sterling Voss at all costs. Last I heard, Sterling was working as a sales associate for an enterprise software company in Phoenix, earning around $75,000 a year and living in a rental apartment. His LinkedIn profile doesn't mention Ellison and Voss systems anymore. It's as if those 9 years never existed. I'm not motivated by revenge anymore. That phase ended when Sterling was sentenced. What drives me now is prevention. Every founder I protect, every startup I help structure properly, every betrayal I prevent. That's my legacy. That's what matters. Sterling tried to erase my contribution to the company we built together. He tried to steal the credit, the money, and the future we'd created. What he didn't understand is that you can't erase the truth. You can hide it temporarily. You can manipulate documents and tell convincing lies. But eventually the truth surfaces. Evidence doesn't forget. Digital records don't change their stories. And the quieter you are while collecting that evidence, the louder it speaks when you finally present it. Sterling's signature is still on every foundational document of Ellison and Voss systems. Every contract, every agreement, every filing that acknowledges my co-authorship, his name appears right next to mine, validating everything he tried to deny. He attempted to erase my history. In the end, he just wrote his own downfall using my ink. I haven't spoken to Sterling since that board meeting in Boston in 2023. I don't plan to. There's nothing left to say. He made his choices. He lives with the consequences. And I've moved on to building something more meaningful than revenge. I'm building protection for others who might face what I faced. The irony isn't lost on me. Sterling wanted to be remembered as the architect of a $10 million success story. Instead, he's remembered as a cautionary tale. I never wanted to be remembered at all. I just wanted to build good systems and solve difficult problems. Now I teach others to protect themselves from people like Sterling. I show them how to document properly, structure carefully, and trust wisely. The best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. It's living well, building something meaningful, and ensuring that what happened to you never happens to someone else. That's the lesson Sterling never learned. Success isn't about taking credit. It's about creating value. And value doesn't disappear just because someone tries to claim it exclusively. It persists. It grows. It finds its way to the people who actually created it. Sterling tried to build his empire on lies. I built mine on documentation, patience, and truth. His empire crumbled in a single meeting. Mine grows stronger every day. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.